Matthew 22, Prodding the perfect sacrifice. The dry erase marker squeaked aggressively against the whiteboard as Pastor Andrew drew a thick horizontal timeline. He paused, cap in hand, looking over his shoulder at the small circle of students. Exodus chapter 12, he began, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet classroom. God gives Israel the blueprints for the very first Passover. On the 10th day of the month of Nisan, every family selects a lamb, but they don't sacrifice it right away. Chloe, what do they do with it for the next 4 days? Chloe leaned forward over her open Bible, her pen tapping against her notebook. They keep it in the house, they inspect it. It has to be watched around the clock to make sure it doesn't have any spots, blemishes, or sickness. It has to be perfect before it goes to the altar. Andrew turned completely around, snapping the cap back onto his marker with a sharp nod. Exactly. It's the inspection period, the testing of the lamb. Now, look at how Matthew structures the timeline of Passion Week. Jesus rides into Jerusalem on a donkey, traditionally celebrated on Palm Sunday, which aligns with the 10th of Nisan. He isn't crucified until Friday, the 14th. For 4 days, Jesus is walking through the temple courts in plain view of everyone. This brings us right into Matthew 22. This chapter isn't just a random collection of theological debates to pass the time before the cross. This is the inspection. The Pharisees, the Herodians, and the Sadducees are going to poke, prod, and test him with every political and religious trap they can think of. They are desperately trying to find a single blemish to justify destroying him, but every single strike only proves how flawless the Lamb truly is. Ben scrolled down his tablet, his eyes scanning the text as he picked up the narrative. It's wild how calculated it feels. In verse 15, it literally says the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle him in his words. They don't even go alone. They bring the Herodians with them, which is crazy because those two groups usually hated each other. They start with the tax question, laying on the flattery thick by calling him a truthful teacher who doesn't care about human opinion, before dropping the landmine. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? It's a flawless trap. If Jesus says yes, the Jewish crowds will turn on him instantly because they loathe Roman oppression. If he says no, the Herodians will immediately report him to the Roman governor for inciting a political rebellion. He's cornered before the debate even starts. Andrew smiled, leaning against the edge of his podium. It's a brilliant political ambush, but watch how the Lamb handles the pressure. He doesn't panic, and he doesn't give a simple yes or no. Instead, he asks them to show him the coin used for the tax, a Roman denarius. When they hand it to him, he asks a deceptively simple question: whose likeness and inscription is this? They answer, Caesar's. Then Jesus delivers a line that completely redefines the boundaries of human allegiance. Therefore, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. It was a masterful stroke. A Roman coin bore the physical image of Tiberius Caesar, so it belonged in Caesar's treasury. But Jesus forces the listeners to look past the metal and ask themselves what bears the image of God. The answer, of course, is humanity itself. He told them to give Rome their cheap coins, but to give God their very lives. The Pharisees wanted a political rebel they could arrest, but instead, they found a transcendent truth that left them utterly speechless. No blemish found. Chloe turned the page of her Bible, captivated by the escalating tension. But they don't give up. As soon as the Pharisees step back to nurse their pride, the Sadducees move in for the next round. Since they didn't believe in the resurrection or the afterlife, they bring this incredibly convoluted, hypothetical scenario about a woman whose husband dies, so she marries his brother to carry on the family line. But then he dies too. It happens 7 times until all 7 brothers have been married to her. They look at Jesus and ask, in the resurrection, therefore, of the 7, whose wife will she be? It sounds like an absurd plot from a bad reality TV show, and it was completely designed to make the concept of bodily resurrection look totally ridiculous and messy. And notice how Jesus completely shifts his tone to address their ignorance, Andrew said, walking over to the side of the room. He doesn't get flustered by their bizarre hypothetical. He tells them bluntly, you are wrong, because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. He explains that the resurrection entirely transforms the nature of human existence, that we won't be bound by earthly marriage covenants in eternity, because we will be like the angels. But then he deals the real theological blow. Because the Sadducees only accepted the authority of the first 5 books of the Bible, Jesus quotes Exodus back to them, reminding them that God spoke to Moses from the burning bush, saying, "I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Jesus points out that God used the present tense, not the past tense. He didn't say, "I was their God." He is their God right now, which means Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are very much alive. He completely dismantles their entire theological platform using the very scriptures they claimed to protect. Ben nodded, tracing his finger along the final paragraphs of the chapter. The room must have been completely electric at that point. The crowd is astonished. The Sadducees are silenced, so the Pharisees rally one last time. A lawyer steps forward to ask him the ultimate trick question. "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" This was a massive, ongoing debate among the rabbis of the day. They had meticulously codified 613 distinct laws, and they were constantly arguing over which ones were weighty and which ones were light. If Jesus picked just one, he would instantly alienate every rabbi who championed a different law. But instead of picking sides in their legalistic debates, Jesus elevates the entire law to its true, divine purpose, Andrew concluded, his voice dropping to a serious, resonant tone. He unifies the Shema from Deuteronomy with a verse from Leviticus, telling them to love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, and mind, and to love their neighbor as themselves. He tells them that the entire Old Testament, all the law and the prophets, hangs securely on those 2 pillars. You cannot claim to love God vertically if you are failing to love your neighbor horizontally. With that single answer, he exposes the hollow core of their entire religious system. Andrew walked back to the whiteboard and drew a decisive, heavy circle around the end of the timeline. Look at how Matthew wraps up this chapter. After Jesus flips the script and asks them a riddle about how the Messiah can be both David's son and David's Lord, a paradox they can't even begin to answer, the text says that no one was able to answer him a word, nor did anyone dare to ask him any more questions from that day on. The 4-day inspection was officially over. The politicians, the theologians, and the legal experts had thrown their absolute best traps at him, and not a single blemish could be found. He stood in the temple courts entirely vindicated, completely unblemished, and fully qualified to walk onto the cross as the perfect sacrifice. The classroom fell completely quiet, the weight of the chapter settling over the students just as the campus bells began to chime outside, signaling the end of the period. Andrew smiled gently, leaning on his podium. "Pack up your things, guys. Tomorrow, we see what happens when the Lamb stops answering their questions and starts delivering his final verdict."